You think having free access in Montana makes you equal to everyone else?
I expect to be treated lawfully.
Lawful. People like you don't come here and start making demands.
I asked for a phone call.
You'll speak when I decide you can. You feel big in here, huh? This is my house. You done? You're gonna learn to stay down before you open that mouth again.
I'm not resistant, Sheriff.
Best keep it that way.
On the evening of June 14th in Red Lodge, Montana, traffic cameras captured what should have been an ordinary stop at a quiet intersection. Within 40 minutes, that routine moment turned into an arrest that would trigger a multi-million-dollar civil rights lawsuit, a county investigation, and months of public scrutiny. The official report described reckless driving. Witness accounts described something else. What happened between tourist Malachi Ronan and Carbon County Sheriff Colter Rains that night would not stay contained to a roadside encounter. It would follow both men into a county jail, a courtroom, and national attention. And it all began while waiting at a red light. If you want real stories told exactly as they unfold, no exaggeration, no shortcuts, subscribe now and stay with this case from start to finish. At 8:17 p.m., Malachi Ronan sat in a rented gray SUV at the intersection of North Broadway Avenue and 11th Street. Engine running, hands resting lightly on the wheel, waiting. He had arrived in Montana 2 days earlier for a quiet holiday, hiking trails, mountain air, open space. Back home, he worked long hours managing logistics operations for a regional distribution firm. Precision, planning, controlled environments, that was his normal life. This trip was supposed to be the opposite. The light stayed red longer than expected. Then headlights filled his rearview mirror. A county patrol unit rolled in close behind him, too close for a normal stop. The vehicle didn't pass, didn't reposition, just stayed there. When the light turned green, Malachi drove forward at normal speed. The patrol vehicle followed immediately. No siren yet, just presence. 2 blocks later, the emergency lights came on. Malachi pulled over beside a closed hardware store. Interior lights still on, both hands visible on the steering wheel, window halfway down before the sheriff even reached the door. Sheriff Colter Rains approached slowly, one hand resting near his belt. He didn't greet him. "You were driving reckless back there," Rains said flatly. Malachi blinked once. "I was stopped at a light." Rains leaned slightly toward the open window, eyes scanning the interior, dashboard, passenger seat, back seat, then Malachi's face again. Long pause. "You visiting?" Rains said, not a question. "Yes, sir." "Figures." Another pause, longer this time. Traffic passed behind them. The sheriff didn't step back. "License." Malachi handed it over calmly. Rains looked at it, then at him, then back at it again. "You've been in town 2 days, already driving like you own the place." "I haven't been speeding, I haven't—" "Don't interrupt me." Silence stretched. The sheriff's tone wasn't procedural, it was personal, like he'd already decided something. Behind them, another patrol vehicle pulled up. Deputy Garrick Lowell Pate stepped out, standing several feet back, watching without speaking. Rains handed the license back slowly. "Step out of the vehicle." Malachi stayed still. "Am I being detained?" His expression hardened. "I said," he repeated, voice sharper now, "step out of the vehicle." His hand shifted closer to his holster. And the encounter changed. Malachi opened the driver's door slowly and stepped out onto the pavement. Evening air had cooled, but the heat from the engine still radiated off the SUV behind him. He kept his hands visible, just like before. Sheriff Colter Rains didn't move back to give space. He stood close, closer than necessary for a routine traffic stop. "Turn around," Rains said. Malachi hesitated. "Can you tell me why I'm being asked to—" "I don't need to explain myself twice." The words came sharp, clipped, not procedural, personal. Malachi turned. Rains stepped behind him, gripping his wrist. Not yet cuffs, just control. The hold was firm enough to signal authority, tighter than required to ensure compliance. Behind them, Deputy Garrick Lowell Page shifted his stance near the patrol unit, arms folded loosely across his vest. He wasn't intervening, just watching. Another vehicle pulled in from the opposite lane and parked at an angle. Deputy Nolan Bryce Ketter stepped out, adjusting his radio mic as he approached. His eyes moved between Malachi and the sheriff, assessing the situation quickly but saying nothing. "Dispatch flagged your driving pattern," Rains said from behind him. "Sudden stops, lane hesitation, erratic movement." "I was navigating. I don't know these streets." "That obvious." The grip on his wrist tightened slightly. Malachi exhaled slowly. "Sheriff, I've been cooperative. If there's a citation, you can issue one." Rains walked around in front of him again. Their faces were level now, less than 2 feet apart. "You visitors come through here," Rains said, voice low but edged, "thinking rules bend because you're passing through. They don't." Malachi held his gaze, calm, steady. "With respect," he said, "I stopped when signaled, provided identification, and followed instructions." Something in that tone, controlled, measured, seemed to irritate Rains more than resistance would have. "Hands on the hood," the sheriff ordered. Malachi paused. "Am I under arrest?" Rains didn't answer immediately. His eyes narrowed slightly, scamming Malachi's face as if searching for something to confirm what he'd already decided. "Hands on the hood." Malachi placed his palms flat against the metal. The surface was still warm from the engine. Passing traffic had slowed. Headlights moved cautiously around the patrol vehicles. The flashing lights reflected off storefront windows and glass doors across the street. Rains began a pat-down, quick at first, then slower, more deliberate, checking pockets twice, pressing along seams, lingering at the waistband longer than necessary. "You carrying anything I should know about?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes." Rains stepped back slightly, but his posture didn't relax. He glanced once toward Deputy Ketter, who remained still, neutral, observing. Then Rains spoke again, louder this time. "Subject is non-compliant." Malachi turned his head slightly. "I'm standing exactly where you told me to stand." Rains's jaw tightened. "That attitude," he said quietly, leaning closer so only Malachi could hear, "is exactly the problem." He reached for the handcuffs. Metal clicked free from his belt, and this time there was no hesitation in his movement. The first cuff snapped shut around Malachi's right wrist, cold metal, tight. "Sheriff," he started, "hands behind your back." The second cuff locked in place before he could finish the sentence. The pressure forced his shoulder slightly forward. Sheriff Coulter Rains didn't adjust the fit, didn't check circulation, just tugged once to confirm restraint, then kept his grip on the chain. Deputy Garrick Lowell Pate stepped closer now, boots scraping lightly across the pavement. He positioned himself near Malachi's left side, not assisting, just reinforcing presence. Deputy Nolan Bryce Ketter remained a few feet back, watching the street, then the sheriff, then Malachi again. Standard positioning, uneven attention. "What exactly am I being arrested for?" Malachi asked, steady voice, controlled breathing. Rains didn't answer immediately. He guided, more accurately pushed Malachi toward the patrol vehicle. Reckless driving, failure to comply, obstruction. Malachi turned his head slightly. "I did comply." Rains leaned closer, voice low enough that only Malachi heard. "You talked, that's enough." Across the street, a pickup truck had slowed almost to a stop. The driver remained inside, window partially down, watching. His name was Caleb Turner Pike, a local mechanic heading home after closing his shop. He hadn't planned to stop, but something about the way the sheriff handled the arrest made him stay. Not the cuffs, those weren't unusual. The pace was, the pressure, the proximity, the silence from the other deputies. Malachi was guided to the rear door of the patrol SUV. Rains opened it, then paused. "Head down," he ordered. Malachi lowered himself carefully into the back seat. Limited space, hard plastic bench, barrier panels separating front and rear. The sheriff shut the door firmly, harder than necessary. Through the tinted window, flashing lights painted the street in alternating red and blue pulses. Reflections bounced across storefront glass, across passing vehicles, across the still-watching pickup across the road. Rains remained outside the vehicle for several seconds, speaking quietly with Pate. Short sentences. No visible reaction from the deputy, just a nod. Ketter approached next. His voice was lower, more measured. "Transport straight to county?" he asked. Rains didn't hesitate. "Yes." Another pause. Then Ketter glanced briefly toward the pickup across the street, Caleb Pike still watching, before stepping back toward his cruiser. Rains opened the driver's door and slid into the front seat. For a moment he didn't start the engine. He adjusted the rear-view mirror instead, angled it downward, directly toward Malachi. Their eyes met through the reflection. "You should have stayed quiet," he said. The engine started. The patrol SUV pulled away from the curb, lights still flashing, heading toward Carbon County Detention Facility. Malachi shifted slightly against the hard seat as the vehicle turned onto the main road. The cuffs pressed into bone with each movement of the suspension. No one spoke during the drive. But when they reached the county facility gates, Sheriff Rains didn't radio ahead for standard intake clearance. He parked first, sat still, then reached for the door handle, slow, deliberate, like whatever happened next had already been decided long before the traffic stop. Sheriff Coulter Wayne stepped out of the patrol SUV without calling in arrival. No radio update, no intake notice. Just the slam of the driver's door and the echo of it rolling across the concrete lot. Malachi remained in the back seat, wrists secured, watching through the partition as Rains walked around the front of the vehicle, unhurried, controlled, like timing mattered less than presence. The rear door opened. "Out," Rains said. Malachi stepped down carefully. His shoulders were stiff from the ride, cuffs still tight behind him. The detention facility entrance sat under harsh fluorescent lighting, no one else outside, just the low hum of electrical fixtures and the distant metallic clang of interior doors. Inside, the booking area smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. A glass divider separated intake from the secured corridor. Behind the counter stood Maribel Shaw Cutter, reviewing paperwork on a tablet. She looked up once, briefly, then again, longer this time, when she saw who had brought the detainee in personally. "Evening, Sheriff," she said evenly. "Book him," Rains replied. She glanced toward Malachi. "Charge?" "Reckless driving, non-compliance, obstruction." Her fingers paused slightly above the screen before continuing. "Procedure first, questions later." "Name?" she asked. "Malachi Ronan." She typed, "Calm, efficient." "Personal property will be inventoried. You'll be searched before placement." Rains didn't leave. He stood beside the counter, arms relaxed but attention fixed, watching every step. That wasn't typical. Maribel noticed, said nothing. From the secured hallway, a door opened and Derek Von Ellery stepped into view, night shift detention guard. He slowed slightly when he saw Rains still present during intake, another small break from routine. "Placement?" Derek asked. "Hold him," Rains answered immediately. Derek looked toward Maribel, then back to the sheriff. "Temporary or—" "I said, hold him." The tone ended the exchange. Malachi was guided through processing, fingerprints scanned, pockets emptied, belt removed. Questions asked in neutral sequence, each answer documented. Sheriff Rains remained within sight the entire time, leaning against the wall near the holding corridor entrance, not speaking, just watching. When Malachi finished signing intake forms, he turned slightly toward the sheriff. "I'd like to make a phone call." Maribel glanced toward Rains instinctively. Procedure allowed it after booking. Rains didn't respond right away. He pushed off the wall slowly and stepped closer. "You're not in a position to request anything," he said quietly. "It's my right after booking," Malachi replied, voice steady. The room went still. Maribel's hands rested lightly on the counter edge. Derek shifted his weight near the hallway door. Rains leaned closer, close enough that only Malachi could clearly hear. "You don't come into my county, act difficult, then start quoting rules like they apply the same way to everyone." He straightened. "Cell 3, he said to Derek. Derek opened the corridor gate. Metal clicked, heavy hinges moved. Malachi stepped forward without resistance. As he passed, Rains spoke again, louder this time. "Maybe some quiet time helps you figure out how things work here." The cell door shut with a solid, final sound. But Sheriff Coulter Rains didn't walk away. He stayed in the corridor, watching. Sheriff Coulter Rains stood outside Cell 3 long after the door locked. The holding corridor was quiet, concrete walls, fluorescent lighting, muted ventilation hum. Malachi sat on the fixed metal bench inside the cell, wrists still stiff from the cuffs, shoulders tight but posture upright. He didn't pace, didn't call out, just watched the sheriff the same way the sheriff watched him. Derek Von Ellery remained near the control panel, pretending to review the monitor feed. He had worked night shifts long enough to recognize when something wasn't standard procedure. Intake complete, detainee secured, sheriff leaves. That was the pattern. Tonight, the sheriff didn't leave. Rains stepped closer to the bars. "You visitors," he said, voice calm but edged with something deliberate. "Always think being polite means being in charge." Malachi didn't respond immediately. He shifted slightly on the bench. "I asked for a phone call," he said, finally. Rains gave a short breath that almost resembled a laugh. "You're still talking like this is a discussion." Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor. Deputy Nolan Bryce Ketter appeared briefly, having finished paperwork at the front desk. He slowed when he saw Rains still positioned at the holding cell. Everything paused for half a second, a silent assessment. "You need anything, Sheriff?" Nolan asked. Rains didn't look back. "Handled." Nolan gave a small nod, but his eyes moved once toward Malachi before he turned and walked back toward intake. The corridor settled again. Rains stepped closer to the bars, resting one hand lightly against the metal. "You know what the problem is," he said, quietly. "You walked in here like you expected to be treated the same as everyone else." Malachi met his gaze. "I expect to be treated lawfully." The sheriff's expression hardened almost instantly. "That confidence," Rains said, voice lower now, controlled, "comes from wherever you think you can challenge people in uniform and nothing happens." Silence stretched between them. Then Rains straightened and stepped back, scanning the corridor once before speaking again, louder this time, meant to carry. "Disruptive behavior during stop, argumentative during intake, uncooperative attitude." Derek's head lifted slightly at the phrasing. None of that matched what he'd observed, but he didn't speak. Rains turned and walked slowly toward the exit gate. For a moment it looked like he was leaving. He stopped halfway down the corridor, turned back. "1 hour, then we'll see if he's ready to cooperate." Derek hesitated. "Standard hold timing is—" "1 hour," Rains repeated. The sheriff left through the security gate. The corridor door shut behind him with a heavy mechanical lock. For several minutes nothing happened. Then Derek stepped closer to the cell, lowering his voice. "Phone access usually comes sooner," he said quietly. "He's adjusting the order." Malachi nodded once, no surprise in his expression. From the front intake area, muffled voices drifted faintly through the walls. Maribel Shaw Cutter speaking with someone who had just entered the building. A woman's voice answered, calm, controlled, professional. Clear enough to recognize authority. "I'm here regarding the detention of Malachi Ronan." Derek glanced toward the corridor entrance. Someone had arrived earlier than expected, and Sheriff Colter Rains hadn't been notified yet. The corridor door opened with a sharp mechanical release. Sheriff Colter Rains stepped back inside, expression already tightened, the kind of tension that comes when control shifts without permission. He moved quickly toward intake, boots striking concrete with deliberate force. Maribel Shaw Cutter stood behind the counter, posture straight, tablet set aside. Across from her stood a woman in a dark, structured coat, leather folder tucked under one arm, calm, still, watching the sheriff approach without stepping back. "Tamsin Claire Harwood," she said evenly before he could speak, "civil rights attorney. I represent Malachi Ronan." Rains stopped 2 feet from the counter. "You weren't called," he said. "I was contacted. That's sufficient." Her tone wasn't confrontational, it was procedural, the tone of someone who already knew the next steps and expected them to happen. Rains' jaw shifted slightly. He's being processed. He's been detained for over an hour without counsel access after requesting communication, Tamsin said. That's documented. Maribel kept her eyes forward, neutral, silent confirmation through stillness. The sheriff turned slightly toward the holding corridor, then back to Tamsin. "This is a traffic arrest." "Then documentation will be simple," she replied. "I'd like to see the reckless driving report, body cam record, and detention justification." A pause stretched between them. Not loud, not dramatic, just pressure building in the silence. From the hallway, Derek Von Ellery watched through the partial opening, arms resting near the control panel. Deputy Nolan Bryce Ketter stood near the far wall now, having returned quietly, observing, saying nothing. Rains finally spoke. He was non-compliant. Tamsin didn't move. Define non-compliance. Another pause, longer. Traffic noise outside hummed faintly through the building structure. Somewhere deeper inside, a metal door closed with a distant clang. Then Rains said nothing at all. Tamsin opened her folder, removed a single sheet, and placed it gently on the counter. "Formal notice of representation," she said, "effective immediately." Silence again. Then Maribel reached for the holding release control. A click. Down the corridor, cell 3 unlocked. Malachi stepped out minutes later, posture controlled, expression steady. His eyes met Tamsin's first, then briefly moved past her, landing on Sheriff Colter Rains. Neither spoke, but something had shifted. What began as a roadside accusation of reckless driving had now become documented detention, delayed rights access, witnessed procedural deviation, and legal representation activated within hours. In the weeks that followed, intake logs, patrol positioning records, and roadside camera footage would all be reviewed. Statements would be taken, timelines reconstructed, authority examined. And the civil claim that followed would name Carbon County directly. $17 million. Not for the traffic stop alone, for everything that happened after the red light turned green. If this story held your attention, there are more real-world encounters just like it, each one broken down from the first moment of contact to the final outcome. Subscribe and follow every case as it unfolds. You won't want to miss what happens next.